And now to officially start our meeting, if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the December 8th Board of Clermont County Commissioners meeting. We have an agenda prepared, and prior to me calling the meeting to order, I just want to acknowledge that Ed Humphrey has joined us from a location, obviously, that's not here at 101 East Main. Ed, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you just fine. I'm at home in the office with no mask because I'm here with my wife and the door's shut.
Absolutely. Understood. For those who are watching, it looks like you're sitting right next to me.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here this morning, Ed. Call this 10 a.m. meeting to order, and we'll start right with the agenda that's been prepared for us with B, approval of regular session minutes of 12/2/2020. Board, you've had those minutes early, had an opportunity to review them. Have any changes or clarifications made? If there are no objections, I would ask for a motion to approve the regular session minutes of 12/2/2020.
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes as prepared.
I'll second the motion.
Then moved and received a second. Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. C on our agenda is a presentation that's from Mary Raines, our Director of Office Budget Management and Budget, Clermont County proposed 2021 budget and appropriations. Mary, are you with us this morning?
I am with you this morning.
Mary, the Zoom meeting is yours.
Oh, well, okay. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And let's see if this is it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. This is the proposed 2021 appropriation presentation. And last week, if you'll recall, we went over the general fund portion of the appropriation. However, there are 114 other funds that are included for board's approval. And that's what we're going to basically highlight today. As you'll recall, last week I said that the appropriated expenditure level for each fund can't exceed the available resources, which is the unobligated cash plus any revenue estimates. So any of the funds that you adopt are going to be balanced by the time we do the adoption, hopefully next week. This is just a review of what we talked about last week. I'm going to skip over this one and more or less talk about it when we get down here to the pies. In the general fund, we did a few changes. This is still what you saw last week. We backed out the 27th payroll. It has the healthcare benefit credits in it. The changes in the elected officials and Board of Election statutory salaries, an increase to our risk management program based on market estimates, some mandated increases for public assistance and the Bureau for Children with Medical Handicaps, which are tied to, those are tied to the valuation. Then we annualized some staffing changes that have been made throughout this year, adjusted the Board of Elections because it's a non-presidential election cycle next year. Anytime we knew that there was a contract that had to be increased, we applied that into the general fund, and then the veteran service efforts that are capped at $500,000. So those are the...
What did that net? How did that turn out? Increasing our budget, decreasing our budget?
It decreased our budget. We went from approximately, let me jump down here, to from a $71 million total appropriation this year down to just under $67 million next year.
But that's also required by the revenue losses, right? Okay.
Correct. So then, when all that rolled up, we took the revenue estimates. This is the same slide you saw last week. We didn't make any changes to that. Property taxes we've increased about 5.5% due to the revalue. The revalue actually has us up almost 12%, but we can expect some changes from the Board of Revisions and delinquencies factored in. So we did just a conservative 5.5% increase in the revenues there. Property taxes only account for about 14% of the county's general fund. Sales tax at almost half of our revenues. We are really dependent upon that. We're projecting a 4.3% increase this year over last, which is tremendously better than what we were looking at the beginning of the pandemic in the spring, when we were looking at reductions in the millions. Next year, we're looking at it going up another 2.5%. The main reason for that, I think, is the internet sales. So the Wayfair decision a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I guess now, has really helped that, so that when people buy online, Clermont County is getting the sales tax for those purchases. Licenses and permits are basically the building permits. Next year, we're going to be expecting some developments in Batavia Township that we're taking into consideration there. That's just under 3% of the general fund. Intergovernmental revenues, that was impacted quite a bit this year from the pandemic with the shutdown of the casinos, the local government funds that are tied to state revenues, they were down, and also the indigent defense reimbursements that we thought were going to be up close to 90%, they cut back to 70% again because of the state revenue reductions. So we get about 10% of our revenues in the general fund from state and federal monies. Charges for services comes in about 16% of the general fund, and that dropped during the pandemic due to the courts being closed and cases down, so the court fees were impacted. Property transactions, on the other hand, that go into charges for services did favorably, and it kept the impact from going much lower than it was. Next year, we expect charges to pretty much bounce back to close to normal levels. Then we have just some miscellaneous revenues that are 1 or 2% of the general fund. Investments, due to our portfolio earnings and maturities on reinvestments being at a lower level. This is only going to be about $900,000 next year. It's dropping down from over $2 million this year. That's what we're going to have to bear with that for a while, as long as the investment period that the treasurer has for our portfolio.
And Mary, just talk about that investment portfolio for a second, just so people really understand that. I mean, my understanding is that decline is because obviously maturity dates of those investments are coming due. Once the maturity date comes and you reinvest that, it'll be reinvested at a lower rate of return than it would have been prior to that.
That's correct. We do have a consultant the treasurer works with on our investments, and we expected a drop this year because we knew that some of our older, longer-term investments were coming due, and that we were seeing were dropping tremendously. So it's not really unexpected, but it is something that we're going to have to adjust to for a couple years anyway, so it can hopefully bounce back up. It's not just general fund monies that are invested. It's all monies that come into the county, even if they come in just for a brief period before they're redistributed, like the tax collections. The general fund does get the bulk of those investment earnings, unless by statute or by a grant, the requirement says that the investments go back to those funds.
Yep.
So it's to offset some of the costs involved with tracking the funds, being the banker, so to speak. That covered for you, Mr. Painter?
It did. Thank you.
Okay. All right, the other smaller ones are the fines and forfeitures. Those were down mainly because of the traffic fines this year. Earlier on the pandemic, the traffic was down. People were just not going anywhere because of the stay-at-home orders. And then also the court closures is related to the pandemic. So those are going to bounce back somewhat. The courts aren't comfortable to put it back totally, but just under $800,000. And then our other revenues are the surplus for the title administration monies, other funds paying us back for insurance premiums, other indirect costs, and lease revenues. So the operating revenues in general fund are just under $63 million for the estimate for next year. We add to that the non-operating, which is either one-time or dedicated funding. We've got the conveyance fee for economic development at $1 million, which is a third of the estimate, and then the other non-operating revenues that come back into the county. Now, this is an overview of the general fund expenses. There have just been some slight changes from last week. We made some adjustments, some rounding, and a minor amount that had been missed in this. So still under $64 million in operating, total of $66.8 million in total. You take a look at this and you look at your criminal justice and your judicial services, that's 2/3 of the county's general fund in the operating. You add public safety into that, which has the comm center, building inspection, and coroner, and you're at 3/4 of the general fund go to public safety, judicial, criminal justice related. Criminal justice includes the sheriff, both juvenile and adult detention facilities, the probation services for juvenile, the adult common pleas and municipal courts, and the CAPS program. Judicial is just that. It's all of the courts and clerks of courts, prosecutors' divisions, except for the civil and public defender's offices in judicial. That's just under $15 million. General government is basically the general administration of the county at just under 12.8, 20% of the general fund, and that's the auditor, commissioners in their departments, treasurer, recorder, board of elections, planning commission, OMB, just the general operations.
Any elected officials office, right, coroner and the rest?
The coroner is under the public safety office, but other than that, yes, the bulk of the elected officials, with the exception of the sheriff and the prosecutor, fall under their general government.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Health and human, that is mainly mandated amounts. We've got veteran services in there that's mandated at not to exceed $0.5 mil. The general fund share of public assistance, which is mandated by the state. Children with medical handicap funding, which is mandated at $0.1 mil. And then we have TB clinic contracted in there at the $3.4 million. So overall, and the non-operating, besides the economic development, we've got the DJFS, Southwest Ohio Regional Training Center, some advances to other funds, and just miscellaneous things that are supported by grant funding or other things. So looking at a $66.8 million expense side. This is just splitting personnel costs to other expenses, so about a 76.24%. So overall, in general fund, we're projecting about $705,000 draw on the general fund balance. Now, this is much better outlook than what we had looked at back in the spring when the pandemic first was hitting, when we were looking at possibly millions of dollars draw. We were looking at having to use our budget stabilization funds and looking at some of the liability funds that we have sitting out there. But mainly because of the strong growth in sales tax and some just other places that we picked up some money, but the bulk of it was sales tax. We're looking at just drawing down about $700,000 from the cash balance. Our goal is to keep about a third of our revenues or our expenses in the cash carryover. And right now we're looking at well over 45%. So we're going to keep a close eye on that and see how the revenues go so that, you know, we don't spiral in the wrong direction. But I think that this is a safe draw on the general fund. Now this ends the review from last week, and there were several outstanding items that the board needs to look at to see if there are any changes. So if you've got anything you need changed on here on the general fund portion, let us know, and we'll plug the numbers in and get back with you. Now here's the other funds. This is just a quick overview of the other 114 funds that we budget for. Health and Human Services, we have the Job and Family Services Office, which includes the Public Assistance Fund, Child Support, Children's Services. They're looking at a reduction from about $27.9 million appropriated this year down to about $24.2 million next year. Now that current appropriation column that you'll see for all of those, total $66 million going down to $61 million. The level of appropriation is not necessarily what they're going to spend. There'll be some adjustments throughout this month, and actually you probably saw some particularly related to the Jobs and Family Services already. Developmental disabilities is going from $22.2 million to $21.4 million. Mental health is relatively flat. Most of what they have are contracts with other nonprofits that pass through the levy funds there. Senior services will see a small change, and it is strictly funded from the levy money. So the only growth you'll see in there is anything that's estimated for new construction. Animal control, we put a to be determined amount in there because right now dog and kennel funds can support roughly $300,000 of expenses. The auditor retains a little over $20,000 of that for the license sales and related efforts on their part, purchasing the licenses and so forth. And the remainder is for the dog control duties required from Chapter 955 of Revised Code. And that would include anything that we need for running the animal shelter. Right now, the general fund has $116,000 support planned for the dog and kennel fund, where the revenues of the dog and kennel don't support the current operation. But that is an area that we are currently actively reviewing, and we'll have to plug that figure in before next week. The juvenile court portion of the Children's Services funds is about $1 million. That's what they've allocated between them and DJFS for the Children's Services program for the kids that wind up in the care of juvenile. Then juvenile court also has some other funds for 4E, indigent driver and alcohol treatment funds, and that runs around $540,000. Finally, we just have some small domestic violence shelter and indigent guardianship monies and miscellaneous, which is a septic rehab program. So that all rounds out proposed for next year for Health and Human Services, non-general fund of just over $61.2 million. Next, we'll take a look at the Environmental and Water Resources funds. The bulk of these are related to the Water Resources Department. And they're projecting $41 million, which is a slight increase over the $40 million in their operations this year. However, on their construction end, they're looking at going from $19 million up to $30 million, and that covers their capital program that they have. Solid waste management runs right around $700,000, so there's not a whole lot of change in there. And that is the joint district between Clermont County and Adams County Solid Waste District. Soil and Water Conservation District, you'll see is going up from $675,000 this year to almost $950,000 next year. They have several grants that'll be running through their offices next year, including the H2 Ohio grant. So some conservation programs that are going to be one-time that they're beefing up for. Stormwater is around $100,000, and that varies depending on what kind of programs are needed in the various stormwater districts that have been established. So the environmental and water resources is going from just under $61 million to $73.6 million next year, based on these estimates. Water resources, I do not believe included anything for the rate study. So what they have right now is basically coming from their current existing rates. Transportation is the engineer's motor vehicle and gasoline tax funds. And in here, the $14.3 million up from $12.6, they do have their capital programs, capital projects included in there, and also $1 million dedicated contribution to the Transportation Improvement District is included in that number. Community Transportation Connection, CTCs, going from $4.8 million down to $3.4. We're still in the process of reviewing that with Bill Harris over at the director of CTC. They have some CARES Act monies that will be coming through the county. A lot of their program was impacted by the shutdown, and they haven't quite gotten back up to par. So we've got to work and see just what they expect coming for next year. These numbers were basically what they had worked on earlier in the year. So I'm going to work with Bill this afternoon and see what we can do with that one. The improvement districts are just the residential improvement districts that have been established, the TIFs, RIDs and the TIFs. So they're going from $4.7 to $4.2 million. So pretty much the transportation is staying relatively flat at about $22 million for next year. Internal service funds are funds that have been set up within the county portfolio to service all county departments and agencies. So they receive their monies from other departments, other funds, and are spent for the sole purpose of what they were established for. So you've got the health insurance fund that's gone up from $15.5 to $15.9 million. That was based on the benefit credits that were reviewed 2 months ago with the board and established. So that will cover our premiums and our claims for the health insurance program. Fleet maintenance is another that we're closely monitoring and may still be changed before we adopt final. It's going from 1.5 down to $1.48 million. CJFS will be moving their fleet maintenance into this internal service fund from where they had it under under their lease program before. So we've got to evaluate what kind of revenues will be coming in from that and what kind of expenses need to go out. So we're taking a closer look at that one still. Telecommunications division at 942 to 882,000. That is where our telephone system and any additional lines are run through that, and departments are charged in accordance with the phones, the data communications that they have in there. Workers' comp, you'll see a large decrease for next year, going from $4.1 million down to $1.2 million. That had a large rebate and dividends that came in from the State Department of Workers' Compensation. $3 million of that went back to different departments this year. So based on the premiums that they were charged and paid, the state returns funds back to the counties, and we return those monies back to the various departments. So the internal service funds are just going from $22.2 million to $19.4 million next year. And next week, you likely see some small changes in here.
Telecommunication includes internet connections as well?
Yes,
Telephone and internet connection?
yes, data and voice.
Thank you.
General government is going in total from $22.9 million down to $20.7 million. And pretty much flat is the commissioners, which is mostly their capital plan, the county capital programs, any buildings, and capital purchases are in there. So that's flat at $12.6 million. The auditor going from $4 million down to $3.8 million. That's the main piece of that is their real estate assessment fund. Then there's a small amount that's the hotel lodging, and then what's left in their accounting system. Now I showed in here the Local CARES Act funding at $2.3 million current appropriation. I believe that's somewhat changed, so it's a little bit higher than that. That has to be spent this year, so there's no budget for it for next year. But it's just kind of a placeholder to show you the comparison. The Clerk of Courts Title Fund has gone from 2019, it was about 1.7 million, gone up to 3.4 and up to $3.8 million next year. And that's, they have some satellite offices and expenses that go in there. That's also where they budgeted $500,000 of a surplus that they gave back to the county. The next two are the prosecutor and the treasurer's delinquent tax funds. Treasurer includes their prepaid property tax fund in there too. The prosecutor has been drawing down on a regular basis by charging part of their civil department salaries into there for the efforts that they use to collect delinquent taxes. So you'll see a drop from $170,000 down to just under $139,000. The treasurer is keeping theirs close to $200,000. The Recorder's Technology Fund is where there's a portion of the recorder fees that go into there to assist with their electronic versions of their records. So that goes in. instead of going into the general fund, is dedicated to this fund so that they can keep their records up to date. And then the Board of Elections has some grants this year that they're not expecting next year.
Hey, Mary, I got just a quick clarification. This is Tom.
Okay.
On the CARES Act funding, that $2.3 million, is that the reimbursement for public safety personnel costs? Is that the placeholder?
That is everything that's budgeted in the county's piece of the monies that came in for the CARES Act. So there'll be the money that goes to the schools, the small businesses that you've done, the PPE, as well as the public safety. So that's the amount that has been appropriated at a point in time. Let's see. Get over here a minute. No, I can get to that.
I know we received about $9 million.
Right, we received almost $9.9 million. So that amount that's in there is a revised appropriation is an old amount. So that actually has gone up to $9.8 million, $9.9 million.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was clear.
I'll update that for next week
Okay.
and also have the expenditures piece out of there for you.
Okay.
Right, economic and community development, that's basically the community development block grant program, which is essentially flat, $1.69 to $1.64 million. And then the economic development investments, the $1.290 that you see there is the same dollars. We had it appropriated this year, and just basically nothing's being spent. It's going to be rolled over into next year. That's for reinvestments of the economic development program. So it's essentially flat at the $2.9 million.
Just a question, Mary, Tom, just to talk about a second, the sale of the property out at Afton and the replenishment of that, where will that be in this budget?
That should go back into the, Mary, where would you place that if the money comes back from the CIC for the purchase of the property out South Afton and comes back to the general fund? Where would you place that?
Generally, that economic development investment fund is where we put the money before that comes back in.
Okay.
So it's in there to reinvest in other programs.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, that is at the commissioner's discretion, that's just been the way it's been handled in the past. We put it back into that development capital fund.
That's fine.
Criminal justice, other non-general funds, we've got juvenile court, that's mainly their reclaim funds that going down from 1.6 to $1.5 million. The sheriff has several non-general fund sources. And the bulk of that $2.8 million is for their contracts that they have with other entities. General fund does contribute to those funds there. Then we have common police court probation and municipal court probation offices. Both have grants that are supported from state monies. So that pretty much stays from around $5 million, 5.7 to $5.6 million for next year. The Judicial Services, these are monies that come in for different programs within the courts. The law library stays from $344,000 to $354,000. And those are supported by court costs. The Clermont Municipal Court has a computerization fund that brings in right around $400,000. The Prosecutor's Advocate Grant was reduced 40%, so that's dropping from $181,000 to $140,000 next year. Juvenile Court has some small grant monies in the computerization fund that comes in around $200,000. Common Pleas Computerization Fund is estimated at $185,000, up from $134,000 this year. Common Pleas Court has some special project funds, Administration of Justice, and their computerization funds, but as you see, those are very minor, going from $66,000 down to $47,000. Probate Court has their computerization and special project funds also that run around $40,000, as does the Domestic Relations Court special project funds at $10,500. So the grand total judicial non-general fund is still staying right around the $1.4 million range. Right now, the county just strictly has special assessment debt. The one that shows as general obligation is really a piece of special assessment that was rolled into a general obligation renewal, but it strictly is for the Stolen Olive Branch assessment project. So we're going from $891,000 down to $787,000 as those assessments get paid off. Public safety, we have the emergency management, local emergency planning commission funds in there at just under $300,000 next year. And the wireless 911 funds going from just under $400,000 to $330,000. Total for the public safety going from $698,000 to $622,000. The wireless 911 is another one that we're looking at that may have to change for next year. The funding has been dropping, or they're anticipating it dropping, and we have shifted some funds from the general fund comm center to a share coming out of this 911 fund. So we've got to take a close look and see what this money is going to be able to support, and it may have an impact on the general fund as well. Now this is just showing the program summary that we just went over all those different various areas, showing that the grand total non-general fund is going from $205.8 million to $208.1 million next year. It just kind of shows the main expenditures that are being planned are in the environmental and water resources area, and then the health and human services area at $61.2 million. Any questions on this slide?
Thank you.
All right, then, in summary, now this is showing you fund type rather than by actual fund. In the general fund type, we have not only the county's general fund, but we have some reserve liability funds in there. So when we look at this, the revenues versus the proposed appropriations, they're a little different than what you saw earlier, to where the draw on the fund balance here, if you take that $1.9 million and the $200,000 there, it comes to $797,264 draw on fund balance. Whereas in general fund, the actual fund, the draw is $705,264. And that's because there's a $92,000 draw on those liability funds. So it gets a little bit confusing, but it's the way the funds, the type of funds that are being reported. Special
But your responsibility. This is a tremendous job. I'm glad this is on this.
Thanks, Ed.
You did well. Thank you.
Thank you. Special revenue funds, those are mostly levy monies and other dedicated revenues. They're planning draw by just over $1 million. The debt service funds will be drawing $59,000, I'm sorry. Special assessments, those are again debt funds drawing down. Capital project funds, we're planning on an $8 million draw, and that all depends on how the capital plan proceeds. This year we put a hold on our program with the pandemic, so if those projects can start moving forward, we hope to see an $8 million draw on those capital funds. Enterprise funds, water resources are looking to have just over $2 million draw. And the outside agencies, which are the mental health, developmental disability, solid waste, they're looking to draw $3.2 million on their balance. And internal services look to be about flat. So in total, the estimated revenues to come in next year are just under $260 million, with the anticipated appropriation of $275 million to spend. So that's going to be about a $15.4 million draw on the overall revenues, cash in the county coffers. And that is it. Any questions, any comments, anything that I missed or you need clarification on? The intent is to bring this back to the board in a final version next week for adoption so that the auditor can get things pulled into the accounting system. Departments can start getting requisitions off of the 2021 budget in preparation for starting business January 1.
Thank you, Mary. Very complete, very thorough.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Tell Emily we said thanks too. And
Yes.
Certainly will. I think she heard you.
any other questions, board? Comments? Thanks, Mary. Then we'll go on
You're
down.
welcome.
We'll go on down the agenda to D. We have another presentation from Lyle Bloom. He's the Director of Water Resources and about a wastewater rate study. Lyle, you there with us this morning?
I am. Good morning.
Morning.
So last week we had Michael Maker with New Gen Strategies participated and presented a recommended water and wastewater rate increases. The summary of those are they would show a 9.5% increase in revenue for water over the next 5 years, so 2021 through 2025. And for sewer, that would show a 3% increase in revenue for 2021 through 2025. We have Michael Maker on the call with New Gen Strategies to maybe do another summary of his presentation. And then also we have Jim Steinmetz, who's the fiscal administrator for the Water Resources Department, also on the presentation to help answer any questions. So again, our intent was last week we made the presentation, come back this week, we will quick recap and answer any questions. And then we plan to come back next week with a recommendation to the board for the rate increases. So I'm going to ask Michael to just do a quick recap on what was presented last week.
Good morning. Thank you, Lyle. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm just going to start to the latter half of the presentation since we saw most of everything before. So these are the recommended water charges and rates for the next 5 years. As we talked about before, you have a fixed charge, a bi-monthly minimum service charge that varies by meter size, and that includes a certain number of gallons by meter size. So you can see the typical residential customer is going to be that first one, the 3/4 inch residential. They get 5,000 gallons included every 2 months, and they currently pay $18. Under the alternative, that charge would actually drop slightly for them to give them a little bit of a break, and then you'd see increases over the next 5 years. Customers also pay a volume rate per 1,000 gallons. So if you use over the minimum, you then pay based on these different tiers. And there's some notes in the bottom on how that's calculated. The one main difference on the alternative is before the second tier rate, the minimum to 1.5 used to be less than the minimum rate, as you can see in that current column. So you're essentially giving customers a discounted rate there on the cost of water. Where really they should be paying more to show that conservation effort. So that's the one change we made on water. On sewer, there was no alternative changes made, it's just the current design, but we then applied those 3% rate increases across the board. Again, bi-monthly minimum charge with gallons included, and then a volume rate where everybody pays the same once you go over the minimum. We like to say that customers don't really care what their rates are, they really want to know what their bill is. So this is a comparison of several typical bills. So we have a residential customer, commercial customer, and then multifamily. And then for residential, we have a small customer, an average customer, and then you see one called survey, and that's to compare with the Oakdale survey that's done periodically. They use 15,000, or they use 22,500 per quarter, which is 15,000 bi-monthly. So if you look at, say, that survey row, the 3/4 inch meter, someone using 15,000 gallons, their bill will go from $111 to the recommended $123. And then this is using that. Yes.
Never mind, I see it. The next slide tells me what the survey is.
Yep, so this is the survey comparison with the 15,000 gallons every 2 months. And as you can see right now, you guys are the lowest of the pack, and you would continue to stay there next year. This also does not take into consideration any rate increases that these other utilities may have in the works. So they may be even higher.
So we'll keep us at the lowest rate.
Yes, this is for next year, so this is for 2021, but yeah, it would keep you at the lowest. Yes.
And we don't know what their increases will be in 2022, so
That's right.
likely stay the lowest.
Yeah, it's most likely. So our recommendations are to adopt the recommended alternative charges and rates for the next 5 years. That's a planning period from 2021 to 2025. And then we would recommend you review rates and charges on an annual basis. You go in and you replace your projected numbers with your actual numbers. And then you really don't need someone like a consulting firm to come in every 3 to 4 to 5 years to kind of take a harder look at trends in the next 5-year forecast. Any questions on that?
Yeah, just a question. I mean, that slide that shows where we are in the pack of water and sewage providers, that's a great thing to be, the most economical provider. These particular increases that are being proposed, and maybe it's for both of you, might take a stab at it. One of the things is, when it comes to operations, obviously the cost is the cost. And when it comes to capital improvements, my question is that are these increases enough to make the water department and the sewage department stand alone for the particular years that we're talking about here? Understand this is a 5-year duration. And in other words, my question really surrounds is that it's great that we're the cheapest, but is our rate increase conducive with what we believe the expenses and the upkeep of these two systems will be? And is the rate increase proposed sufficient enough to allow that to happen on a duration that's reasonable enough to get a lot of these projects I know that Lyle wants to do completed?
Yeah, and I'll let Miles
I can answer
break
that.
them. Yeah, go ahead, Miles.
So the rate study did incorporate our capital plan, our 5-year capital plan.
Yeah.
And our capital plan does incorporate necessary improvements that we feel are required to maintain our system and keep up with any environmental upgrades that might be required for new regulations. I'll just use our distribution system for an example. We have about 126 miles of original water main that was installed in the 1950s. Our plan is to try to replace all of that distribution system by the time it reaches 80 years old. So right now, for the next couple of years, we're trying to replace about 20,000 feet a year. Beginning in 2023, we want to plan to begin replacing about 25,000 feet a year. And as the years progress, we're going to increase more and more. So again, by 2039, if we follow this plan I've kind of laid out, we'll have all of that distribution system replaced. Again, we're trying to replace, we track how many main breaks we have a year in each portion of our system. So we try to replace the areas that have the most frequency for main breaks and that impact the largest areas or more critical customers to try to maintain reliability with those customers. So back to your original question, yes, it does. I do believe that the proposed rate increases will provide the necessary funding for the capital plan that we have laid out.
And then Lyle, if we have these rate increases and just for thought processes, if none of these that are listed on this chart have a rate increase, where would we field in the middle here?
If none of the other utilities do,
Yes. Would it put us
Well,
in the middle of the pack, the upper portion of the pack, or the lower part still?
we'll still be in the lower part. What Michael has presented assumes that none of these other neighboring utilities are going to do a rate increase.
That's right.
And we're pretty confident that some, if not all, will.
Right.
So it's the most conservative assumption. I doubt that any will do rate decreases. So if they stay status quo and there's no rate increases, and we fall with our proposed or recommended rate increase strategy, we'll still be at the bottom of the pack here locally within our neighboring communities.
Yeah, and in my comment, you get where my comment was. You do a great job planning and all that. I just wanted to make sure that, the consideration for 9.5 isn't a consideration to keep us one of the lowest water rates, although that's very achievable and desirable. But also, I just wanted to make sure that number really isn't 12.5 or 13% to actually be able to, replace that infrastructure at a rate that is reasonable.
I think we've captured what will be required, but again, we'll evaluate this, review this every year, and kind of plug in our actual numbers like Michael recommended. We've got the rate model itself, which is just a large spreadsheet essentially that Jim Seidmetz and I can plug in our actual numbers and make sure that we're on track over the next 5 years.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, board? Okay. Thanks so much. Great presentation.
Commissioners, do you want to take the opportunity for some type of public comment period to allow the public to comment on these rates? Either obviously we've done that before through we can do it through Facebook, we can do it through our website. But is there a certain period of time you would like to be able to do that?
Yes.
I know we're talking about the 16th, and we also have a meeting on the 28th, right before the end of the year. So it would be the commissioner's pleasure how long you want that comment period, if we want to do it just for the next 6 days, 7 days, and then come back on the 16th, or we can do it for a longer period.
I'd like to see it go on the 28th, only because by the time some people don't review the the sessions and for a few days afterwards, and that'll give them, I don't want to cut into that time. But I believe you're correct. Public comment would be in order here.
Hey Lyle, how would you suggest that we do that? I know we've done it in various ways for some of our public hearings, but how would you suggest we do that and get those comments back?
I'll work with Mike Bamer. I think social media is going to be the best approach. With rate increases for our system, there's no required public comment period or required public hearing. That doesn't say we shouldn't allow that opportunity, but there's no statutory requirements, so there's no required guidelines. But I think social media, we can maybe put something on our website, but it seems to be that social media would get the most attention. So I'll work with Mike Bamer on that. I know he's already worked on a press release regarding this, but we can work on something through that to use social media.
Yeah, I think the desire would be that, whatever press release went out, that there's obviously an option included in that press release if someone has comments or, wants to contact, that they can.
Could we put a survey on our website that we address there and say, if you want to make comment, hit this survey? And the survey to have a bunch of lines that allow people to talk about various options and others.
I'll work with, like I said, I'll work with Mike and see what we can put together.
Very good, thank you.
That'll work.
All right.
Anything else,
So
Tom?
we're not keeping it open until the 28th?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We'll be back on the 28th. Yeah, it'll be presented to the board on the 28th.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Nothing under the presentations, no sir.
We will move on with the agenda to E. Board of Consent Agenda has been prepared for you. I know you've had it early since Friday, had an opportunity to review it. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda for further conversation or discussion?
No?
Hearing none, then I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as provided.
I make the motion.
Second?
Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Then we would go to F, starts our non-consent agenda, and it starts on page 9, at item number 14. The recommendation that the Board of County Commissioners adopt Resolution 184-20 resolving to approve payment to vendors in the total amount of $2,168,072.83 as set forth in the BCC approval invoice reports for the checks dated December 8, 2020, BCC directed prepaid invoice reports, and/or the procurement card transaction report as presented by the county auditor on 12/7/2020, and further authorizing the county auditor to issue warrants for the same pursuant to section 319.16 of the Ohio Revised Code. Do I have a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
I'll second.
Been moved and received a second. Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Item number 15.
Good morning, I'm Tim Dick, Director of the Department of Job and Family Services. Item 15 is a recommendation of myself with the concurrence of Thomas J. Eichel, County Administrator, to execute the contract for services by and between the Board of Clermont County Commissioners on behalf of Clermont County Department of Job and Family Services and Speak Right LLC, located in Austin, Texas, relative to the provision of voice-to-document transcription services for caseworkers of the Department of Job and Family Services, Children's Protective Services Division, at the rate as defined in Exhibit B, reimbursement policy attached thereto and incorporated therein, with an estimated annual cost not to exceed $10,000, effective for the period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021, pursuant to and in compliance with the terms and conditions specified therein. Commissioners, this program, the benefits of this program is, this is a phone program versus a computer program, which is important for our children's services workers that are working out in the field. Also, there's a 3-hour turnaround time with this program, which is a standard feature of SpeakRight. So they will be able to forward or email the transcribed notes to the caseworkers. There's a 99% accuracy rate, which is obviously an important feature. So we have there's going to be a little work for the workers to have to correct when this information is emailed back to them. So efficiency-wise, it's very beneficial. And something else that we've heard great feedback. There are several public children's services agencies in Ohio that have started using this the last couple of years, and we've had great feedback from those agencies. So the end result that we hope to see from this, and that other children's services agencies have seen from this, is reduced documentation demands that contribute to both overtime and staff turnover.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 15. Do I have a motion for approval?
Make the motion?
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion? Roll call, Holly.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I asked about this, and the selling points for me were the reliability, because I do use the voice on Word, and I find that there's a lot I have to correct. And the ability to use a telephone rather than a computer. So I think this is a good service, and we should support it.
Okay. It's been moved and received a second, and there's been conversation. Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Item number 16. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Item number 16, good morning, Craig Reisner, Clermont County Engineer's Office. The recommendation of Jeremy P. Evans, County Engineer, with concurrence of Thomas Eibel, County Administrator, execute record plat number 6293245 for the replat of lots in the following subdivision in Goshen Township. This is Cedar Lake subdivision, and the purpose is to create a new lot number 9A.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 16. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second?
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Item 17.
Item 17 is a recommendation of Jeremy Evans, County Engineer, with concurrence of Thomas Eibel, County Administrator, to execute record plat number 6293246 for the following subdivision in Union Township, and further execute a combined performance maintenance bond as well as a performance bond for sidewalks. This is 12 Oaks subdivision. The performance bond is $26,000, the maintenance bond is $10,000, and the performance bond for sidewalks is $16,500.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 17. Do I have a motion for approval?
Make the motion?
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Anything further? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Item number 18.
Item 18 is a recommendation of Jeremy Evans, County Engineer, with concurrence of Thomas Eibel, County Administrator, to authorize David L. Painter, President of the Board, to execute change order number 1 to the contract with Roberts Paving, Inc., Hillsborough, Ohio, previously ratified by the Board in June of 2020 for project number 1050055, relative to the Pierce Township Park Paths project located in Pierce Township. This is an increase in the amount of $3,722.18 for a total contract price $232,872.12 for additions, deletions, modifications to the contract. Upon the issuance and release of the purchase order required therefore. So this is the final quantities change order for the bike path project located in Pierce Township on Locust Corner Road.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 18. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second?
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Item number 19.
Item number 19 is a recommendation to execute an extension of contract between Clermont County and Rumpke of Ohio Incorporated at 3990 Generation Drive in Cincinnati, which is a new corporate address, for biosolids and alum residuals disposal services for the Clermont County Water Resources Department. This is previously ratified by the board on March 8, 2017 for an additional one-year period through December 31st, 2021, pursuant to and compliant with Article 8 of the reference contract, with all other terms and conditions to remain in full force and effect and contingent upon the adoption of the 2021 annual appropriations and the issuance of a purchase order.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 19. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Item number 20.
Item 20 is a recommendation to execute an extension of contract between Clermont County and Utter Construction out of Bethel, Ohio, for biosolids management services for the Clermont County Water Resources Department. This was previously ratified by the board on December 17th, 2015 for an additional one-year period through December 31st, 2021, pursuant to and in compliance with Article 8 of the reference contract, with all other terms and conditions to remain in full force and effect, and contingent upon the adoption of the annual appropriation for 2021 and the issuance of the purchase order.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 20. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Thanks, Lyle. Item number 21.
Good morning.
Morning.
Item number 21 is a recommendation of William Harris, Director of Clermont Transportation Connection, to adopt resolution number 182-20, previously approved by the Board of County Commissioners on 12/2/2020, resolving to authorize Thomas J. Eigel, County Administrator, to execute the grant contract number EHTA-4067-GR2-211, by and between Clermont County Board of Commissioners and State of Ohio Department of Transportation, 1980 West Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43223 for the state fiscal year 2021 Elderly and Disabled Transit Fare Assistance Program, which provides for public transportation services at a reduced fare for elderly and disabled passengers traveling in Clermont County, parts of Hamilton County, and the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, in the correct amount of $39,410 for calendar year 2019, pursuant to the terms and conditions set forth therein and in compliance with Ohio Public Transportation State Fiscal Year 2021 Transit or Urban Transit System allocations, therefore.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 21. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey.
Aye.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Item 22.
Item 22 is a recommendation of William Harris, Director of Clermont Transportation Connection, with the concurrence of Thomas J. Eigel, County Administrator, to adopt resolution number 185-20, resolving to authorize William Harris, Director of Clermont Transportation Connection, to file an application for federal assistance and to furnish such additional information as required in connection with the application on behalf of the Clermont County Board of Commissioners with the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Transportation Administration, 1200 New Jersey Avenue, Washington, D.C. 20590, under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, in the amount of $3,976,942, with no local match required, for all eligible operating activities that occur on or after January 20th, 2020, pursuant to and in compliance with the terms and conditions set forth therein.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 22. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second.
Been moved and received a second. Anything further?
Commissioners,
Sure.
just to clarify on this, this is the CARES Act funds for CTC. So, and I believe, Bill, these are all going to go towards our operating expenses, and there's no deadline like the other CARES funds are at the end of the year. There's no deadline for these funds. So I believe we're going to use those over the period of the next several years. Our ridership is still down. It hasn't fully recovered. We don't anticipate it recovering fully next year either. So this is a huge help to us.
Okay.
Fantastic. Any other comments? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Item number 23.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everybody. It's a fairly straightforward recommendation from the prosecutor with the concurrence of Tom Idle, County Administrator, is to authorize the President of the Commissioners, Board of County Commissioners, or in his absence, any other member of the Board of County Commissioners, to execute a satisfaction of mortgage, certifying that the terms of the mortgage, as they set forth below to the Commissioners there, that the terms of the mortgage and note are satisfied and authorizing the recorder to release the mortgage of record for the following property as it relates to the county's neighborhood stabilization program. Basically a $38,000 mortgage made about 2010. It's been paid off, so it's ready to be cleared of record.
Thanks, Jason. Board, you've heard the reading of item number 23. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Item number 24.
Item
Thanks,
20
Jason.
24 is a recommendation of Dan Aki, the Superintendent of Clermont County Board of Developmental Disabilities, to appoint or reappoint the following individuals to serve on the Clermont County Board of Developmental Disabilities. Is Larry Graham and Emily Chestnut, and their terms are 1/1/2021 through 12/31/2024.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 24. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Been moved and received a second. Anything further? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Item number 25.
25 is a recommendation to reappoint Greg Holman to serve on the Clermont County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the term is 9/20/2020 through 9/19/2023.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 25. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Item number 26.
Item 26 is the request to join the Clermont Chamber as a county-wide membership, and the annual dues for the membership will be $7,971.65, and this is pursuant to Section 32521 of the Ohio Revised Code, and in accordance with the policies and procedures of the Board of County Commissioners, and in compliance with the annual appropriations for calendar year 2021.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 26. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second.
Been moved and received a second. Anything further?
Yes, this is a discount if we allowed all of the elected officials to join independently and separately. This gives us a better rate than allowing that to happen. So this is why we do it as a group.
Good point, Ed.
Understood. What you're talking about is if the 21 elected officials that represented the different departments throughout the Clermont County would go in and buy their own membership to,
Right.
obviously that would be much more expensive than buying it as a bulk.
Yeah,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey, you're correct. We looked at this back in 2018, and we had, and at that time, the annual cost was $7,628, but if we looked at it for just certain departments, it would cost us over $8,000, so that's why we
Yep.
stayed with the countywide.
Yep.
Got it.
That's what we do it.
Anything further on item 26?
That's all.
Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Item number 27.
Item 27 is a recommendation to authorize Edwin H. Humphrey, Vice President of the Board, to execute the joint application for employment of outside legal counsel with the Clermont County Prosecuting Attorney to the Clermont County Court of Common Pleas for the employment of the legal counsel pursuant to and in compliance with Revised Code 305-14 for the representation of Clermont County Commissioner David L. Painter in and as it relates to the litigation resulting from the probable cause affidavit filed by Christopher Hicks on January 30, 2020 in the Clermont County Municipal Court and designated as case number 2020 PC 00001. And I have Mr. Ramos here with me today in case there are any questions regarding that item.
Board, you've heard the reading of item number 27. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion?
Yes, I received an email this morning from Mr. Hicks opposing this, but I think it's a very positive thing. I think that if Mr. Painter would not have been charged had he not been a county commissioner. So I think this is appropriate.
Anything further?
I have some questions. Mr. Ramos, I have some questions from you from the legal department, from the prosecutors, please. And these are my questions as follows. Number one, it's my understanding that Mr. Hicks filed a citizen's complaint alleging Commissioner Painter committed a felony theft in office, a violation of ORC 292141A. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. My next question is, it is also my understanding that the prosecutor's office does not represent the Clermont County office holders charged with the violation of the criminal code. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's a clear conflict of interest as it relates to those type situations, especially where there's a statutory client that the prosecutor's office is obligated under the statute to represent. And in addition, of course, the prosecutor cannot defend criminal actions, and this was, as you pointed out, a charge directed at an office holder, Commissioner Painter. Specifically, the statute that Mr. Hicks referenced was theft in office,
Right.
which is clearly directed to an elected official.
And that's what brings me, so accordingly, the outside legal counsel had to be retained in this case.
Yes.
Thank you.
And it was, if I may, and I don't mean to interrupt,
No,
but
it's fine.
in a criminal environment or criminal prosecution environment, it's different from civil actions where we've been involved with civil actions before, and there's time within which to follow certain procedures to go through to get outside counsel appointed. In a criminal prosecution, there are specific time frames that are involved such that the person who is charged has to act very quickly in order to present the appropriate defense.
And also, is it true that the sanctions in the amount of $7,818 were levied at that time against Mr. Hicks because the lower court determined that a theft in office charges to be frivolous?
That is correct. However, I believe it was the 12th District Court of Appeals that determined that those fees were not, or that those sanctions were not appropriate in a citizen's complaint situation.
Yes, and my understanding also. And is the amount of $250 for his legal counsel, Commissioner Painter's legal counsel, a fair and reasonable for legal representation by Aaron Moss in this matter?
It's my understanding that in this community, that range, or the range of charges, hourly rates, go anywhere from the $100 up to the $500. In fact, the board has been not required, but has elected in the past to retain outside counsel at a much higher rate.
And I have a final question for you. Is it the prosecutor's opinion that the payment of legal fees in this matter is an appropriate expenditure of county funds?
Yes. This, again, the charge specifically on the complaint that was filed by Mr. Hicks was directed at an elected official claiming that while he was in office, he did commit a theft offense. So given those kinds of facts, there's really obviously a conflict of interest. And given those sets of facts, Mr. Ferris is of the opinion that this is an appropriate expense.
And thank you, Mr. Ramos. I appreciate it. Thank you for the answers.
Well, I just want to tell you that I appreciate those questions and answers. That sets it up for the public to understand our decision here.
Thank you. I'm finished with my discussion. I'd like to make a motion at this time.
It has been moved and second already. Is that correct?
It has.
It has. So I would just ask, any further conversations or issues, comments?
I would just like to move, it's part of that motion to authorize a joint petition to Common Pleas Court, which allows Mr. Painter to retain outside counsel in an amount not to exceed $7,500.
I think you made that motion already, and I agree.
Okay.
I second it, if that's appropriate now, I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and received a second. No further conversation? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran?
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey?
Aye.
Commissioner Painter?
Abstain. That brings us to G, additions to the agenda. Any additions to the agenda today?
Yes, sir. I think Mr. Bickford has a discussion with the board on something he wants to potentially add to the agenda, so I'll turn that over to him.
Okay.
That's correct. We have a request of potential add-on for rejection of all proposals received for dog care and housing services for the county dated October 1st, 2020.
Board, you've heard the request for an addition to the agenda to cancel all bids for the dog services contract. Do I have a motion to add that to the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
Then moved and received a second. Any further conversation? Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey?
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran?
Yes.
Commissioner Painter?
Yes. Mr. Bickford, proceed.
Okay, it is my recommendation with the concurrence of Mr. Eigel to reject all proposals received on October 1st, 2020 for dog care and housing services for Clermont County, Ohio at the Clermont County Animal Shelter located at 4025 Philliger Road, Batavia, Ohio, pursuant to and compliance with Chapter 307.862 of the Ohio Revised Code relative to the procedure for competitive sealed proposals.
Board, you've heard the reading of the addition to the agenda for cancellation of the bids with the animal services contract that was out there currently. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
It's been moved and received a second. Any further conversation or discussion?
Sure, I have a couple of points just to kind of go through why we're recommending this. If you'll bear with me for a second here, let me just kind of lay this out, what we've gone through over the last 2 months as we've reviewed the proposal as well as entered into negotiations with the group. So there was one respondent, obviously, and unfortunately we were unable to negotiate a contract with that organization. We did start negotiations on November 18th, 2020, and we did request from them their 2021 requested compensation, and they provided that number to us. It was $848,726 for the animal services, which we are currently getting under the contract with the group. Now it expires at the end of the year. This did include the dog wardens and other items that are part of the animal control contract. The requested amount did not include utilities of the facility, vehicles, certain supplies, other items that would have been miscellaneous expenses. So that would have been above and beyond the requested compensation amount. And the total approximate cost of the county would have been close to $1 million when you factor in $41,000 for utilities, $70,000 in new requested vehicles, and then additional miscellaneous equipment, including communications and radio airtime. In response to that, the county county staff, I should say, offered up proposed compensation and a 3-year contract for starting at $500,604.72 in cash payments for 2021, plus additional items of value. So we based our offer on 3 different criteria. The first one was in November 19th of 2019, the CARES group submitted a request for 2020 of $420,000 to operate the animal shelter. So we took that number into consideration for going forward. We added utility costs of the facility into our proposal, as well as miscellaneous equipment, a 3% escalator beyond year 2022, as well as some other miscellaneous items. We also took a look at known market conditions. We know what animal care services cost other surrounding jurisdictions to us. We took that into consideration as well. So the terms of our offer was the $500,604.72 in cash payments. We also agreed to lease the shelter building, which the commissioners own, at $1 a year for the term of the lease agreement. The value of that lease on a market rate is approximately $170,000 per year. As part of that, the society shall pay water, sewer, electric, heating, cooling, telephone, internet, and trash services on the premise. The county would provide 2 vehicles for lease for the society at the rate of $1 per year to be used by the dog warden and their deputies throughout the term. And the county would provide required handheld radios and airtime so they could talk to dispatch. That, along with the other miscellaneous equipment, is how we came up with that number. Now, we did known market conditions just to make sure we were kind of in the ballpark of what we were offering in compensation. So the CARES group submitted IRS 990 forms from 2018 and 2019. Those costs were listed as, respectively, in 2018 to 2019, $674,000 and $671,000. Based on the revenue from the county and the donations the group received, that puts the cost for a county our size at about $420,000. Comparatively, we had Warren County, where the county is in partnership with the Humane Society. The county contributes $238,702 for their 955 services. And then we look at the CARES contract that the Cincinnati Animal Care signed with Hamilton County just earlier this year, $1.95 million, with a population of 817,000, which is approximately 475,000 per 200,000 population. So when you factor all that together, that's how we came up to our offer based on $500,604. We presented that to them, we negotiated back and forth, and then on December 3rd, CARES rejected our offer and said their offer of $848,726 was firm. And then we did reconfirm that 12/7/2020 after requesting that the CARES board itself did review that offer, and it just wasn't a staff decision.
Understood.
Hopefully that makes sense. That's just kind of drawing out how we came to what we came up with and where we're at today.
Just a couple questions. You know, the request for proposal that went out had a requirement in it for basically as low as possibly achievable euthanasia rate, and that the acceptable use of euthanasia for many years now here in Clermont County has only been for animals that were not medically viable or were such vicious in nature that they could not be retrained. And that was also included in this RFP.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that was started over 6 years ago before the current contract, and that was one of the top points of the current RFP was to maintain the services as close to no-kill as possible.
And you know, as far as myself personally, you know, any path forward that we would choose today will also include that same requirement in the future. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then also, is it my understanding that the request for proposal included the need for prospective bidders to provide audited financial data?
That's correct. There was a stipulation that that information be provided.
In this particular RFP, since we only had one bidder, did that bidder ever provide audited financial data?
They did not.
Okay. So the financial that was provided was 990 forms, is that correct?
The IRS 990 forms.
And after all expenses were incurred on those 990s and filed, had they extinguished all of their financials on those 990s, or was there carryover funds?
According to the 990 filings, in 2018, there was an ending balance of $86,186, and then in 2019, there was an ending balance of $41,940.
Okay. So this is going to take us on a path forward without a partner for Humane Services. And just explain the different sections of the code. The 955 requirement, then there's a 959 and a 1717. Could you explain those? Just
I'll start with 955. 955 is the Ohio Revised Code section that is what the county is legally obligated to deal with stray and unlicensed dogs.
Okay.
There are requirements based on dog warden services, which are currently provided to us by contract. And that is basically if there is a stray dog or a running at large dog, the dog warden has the ability to seize that dog, and then it is held at the animal shelter for 3 or 14 days, depending on if it is a licensed or unlicensed dog. After the 3 or 14-day hold periods, then the dog has a disposition, whether that's adoption, whatever it may be. The way the contract was set up in 955, once our hold periods ended, that particular animal became property of the society. Then the society was responsible for its disposition.
And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand, that we have an obligation by Ohio Revised Code for animals that are found stray or unattended in the county, and that once those hold times, that doesn't mean that you have to destroy this animal. That means that it can become property of a humane society, and that humane society can be anywhere.
Correct.
Okay.
It can be a humane society, it can be an animal rescue, it can be fostered out. There's a whole variety of things that could happen.
So if this motion stands and this board approves this, we will proceed with providing this care. And so our intentions would be that we would provide that same care, and then we would make these animals available to a humane society. And a humane society is in accordance with 959, 1717.
So
Okay.
you can, there are different options, but we would proceed the same way.
Okay.
So you'd have dogs available for fostering or for adoption, transferring to other rescue agencies. So the process by which we would try to get rid of the dogs would be the same. And then we still have the same euthanasia requirements. So we're not going to be putting down animals unless they meet those requirements that the
Wanna make
county
sure.
established 6 years ago.
And just to make sure, this board has absolutely no intention of destroying animals unless those animals were totally, not medically viable by any means. We are going to go forward with what I will call a no-kill strategy, in that euthanasia is as low as possibly achievable.
That's correct.
Okay. And then just to go over the 959 requirement, the 959 requirement allows us to...
You want to handle it? Go ahead. So the 959 is cruelty to the animal code. So humane societies are set up so that their humane officers can enforce 959. Now, officer is defined, a deputy sheriff can also do that as well. So for our 959, it would be the sheriff's office would assist our dog wardens in cruelty to animal cases. So in those cases, it can include all animals. So it can include livestock, horses, it can include cats, and it can include dogs.
Okay.
So for a dog, it has to be the dog warden. For other animals, it would be a partnership between the dog warden and the sheriff's office, because it does have to be an officer. So
Okay.
humane societies are set up for that purpose. So many counties do have humane societies, like the SPCA in Hamilton County is not affiliated with the county anymore, but they still operate their humane society, and they still have humane officers, and they
Okay.
still have an adoption center. So they are still active in the county, even though they don't have a relationship with the county. So we're hoping that our humane societies will continue to be active in the county. But that is the difference between the 955 code and 959 code. And then 1717 is just the establishment of a humane society.
Right.
And that allows the county, if the county wants to put in additional funds to support the activities of the society, they can, which we've done over the past several years from our general fund.
And just talk about that a second. For over the last couple of years, we've pretty much been making a donation to that humane society in the amount of about $116,000.
Yeah, it's varied over the years.
Okay.
I think back in Greg, 2017, I think the general fund contributed about $45,000. This past year, we increased that to about $116,000. So we've had to. The dog and kennel funds are down. So anything in addition to what the society needs to operate has to come from the general fund.
Okay.
So if you look at what the proposal is of $500,000, as Mary indicated, the dog and kennel fund may be about $280,000. So we're contributing an additional $220,000. So you're looking at so last year it went from 310 to 419. So that's a 35% increase, and now we're looking at another 19% increase.
Okay.
So just in the past couple of years, we've gone from 310 to, and our proposal was over 500,000.
Okay. And as we go forward here, there's no limitation on people who are currently involved at our animal shelter now not being able to reach out to seek employment with Clermont County and continue that mission. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
So if they're interested,
Volunteers can continue to volunteer.
Right.
absolutely.
But in addition, because there'll be some positions that will be required, they also have the opportunity to apply for those positions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like anyone else.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Anything else, board?
Yes, one of the sticking points I understand from talking to administration was dog warden. We had initially put in the RFP that we would prefer to take over the dog warden service. They felt it was very important for them to continue that because there's synergies with the other things that they need to do, and we said that was okay to put that back in, and we would continue to pay them for dog warden service. My understanding of the contribution that we have from the general fund was $151,014.57 last year. So $151,000 came from the general fund, and we know that the general fund is hurting. We're taking $705,000 drawdown on our reserves in order to make our budget without this in there. So I don't see how we can afford an increase of from $419,000 to $848,000, $429,000 increase in the cost from the general fund for our dog warden service.
Yeah, that's correct, Commissioner Humphrey, because the dog and kennel fund didn't come in as anticipated. So that's why the general fund contribution went from, the 116 or 119 up to 151.
And we've encouraged the Humane Society to work on improving the dog licensing and increase that fund, but instead we've seen that fund continue to decline. The dog and kennel fund in 2018 was $310,000, in 19 was $293,000, and in 2020 was $267,000. So they have not increased that fund. They have in fact decreased it. You would think that they would find that to be a benefit, but.
Yep. And just to cut to the chase, just to talk about, we only had one bidder. Obviously, the organization that has that animal shelter now and Humane Society together, they did a good job. They've had that contract. We renewed that contract each year. I mean, obviously, if this board had not been satisfied with the work that they did and the output that they had, we would not have renewed it in the times we are. And just to say, it's unfortunate that two sides can't come together and make this thing work on down the road. But, as with any procurement, quality is one thing, and the quality of that contract was good. And the next thing is, is the cost appropriate and is the cost acceptable? And in this particular case, we just can't come to a dollar value. And that's why you have recommended rejecting the bids.
So I would also like to have us go out for bid for an RFP for the same work, but just the Humane Society portion of it. And see if we have bids submitted there. That's the next step, I think, after this.
I would kind of clarify that. I would believe because of the short time frame, we probably have to move to secure this facility. But then
I think we have to do that, but at the same time, we just need to go out for an RFP so that at some point in time, we get a Humane Society or at least try to get a Humane Society to take it on. And the benefit to them is a $170,000 building that's free for them to use. And that is a substantial amount of money funding for anyone, for any group that wanted to do that.
You bet. Any other conversation or discussion? Roll call, Holly.
My apologies.
All right, we're all catching.
Been taking notes, that was a ways back.
No problem.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
I,
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Any other additions to the agenda?
No, sir, not at this
I'd like
time.
to see us ask our staff to go put together an RFP for the Humane Society portion of that we can see at our next meeting.
Well, the only short-term issue, Commissioner Humphrey, with that is that if we move to hire our dog wardens, our deputy dog wardens, and then our kennel staff, we'd have to look closely at exactly the services that the Humane Society would then be providing, because we would be taking on a majority of the staff.
Right.
And so that would be something we'd have to look closely at.
Well, I want us to do that soon because I think that there is space there available and there are people that would likely jump forward. We have 3 humane societies in Clermont County. There likely would be somebody that jumps forward to accept the $170,000 building minus the portion that we would need to kennel dogs, cats, and other domestic animals.
Okay, we'll try to put something together for you.
And I think moving forward, as we do this, obviously, Tom, there'll be a list put together. What would you call it? A complement list of all the organizations and all the fostering and all of those kind of contacts that move forward. And after we get all that established, and sometime down the road, then, if we get some humane societies that come forward and want to team with that, we could team by a formal agreement.
We could do that.
You bet. Okay. Okay, if there's no other additions, then I'll move on to H. I'm requesting an executive session pursuant to Section 121.22 G1 of the Ohio Revised Code to consider the employment or compensation of one or more public employees. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and received a second. Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes, we will move into executive session. We will return and we will conduct further business. Thank you. Holly, we went out into executive session and I know the desire is to invite Commissioner-elect Bonnie into the executive session, and I'm so sorry about that, Bonnie Batchelor. Excuse me for doing that. So we're back from executive session. There were no actions taken. There were no decisions made. And we are in regular session. So I am going to add a second executive session, requesting a second executive session added to our agenda today. Do I have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
A second.
Been moved and it's received a second. Therefore, I would request that we go into executive session pursuant to Section 121.22
We
G1.
did vote on that previous one.
Yes, oh no, we need to vote, that's right. So,
We did vote on our.
we've added it to the agenda. Do I have, we got a motion and a second. Roll call, Holly.
This is to the executive session as amended to include Commissioner-elect Bonnie Batchelor.
No, this is.
This is just to add it on.
To the agenda.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. So we have amended the agenda. And so now I would request that we move to executive session pursuant to Section 121.22 G1 of the Ohio Revised Code to first consider the employment or compensation of one or more public employees. And I would request that Commissioner-elect Bonnie Batchelor be allowed to attend that executive session today. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Then moved and received a second. Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Painter.
Yes. Now we will move to executive session. We will return and we will conduct further business. Sorry about that. Thank you. We are back from executive session. There were no actions taken and no decisions made. We will proceed on with the regular agenda. Just one last time, are there any other additions to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay. Then I will go to I, county elected and staff official discussions. Any further county elected or staff official discussions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then we'll go to J, board member comments. Board members, any comments today?
My only comment is stay safe.
Absolutely.
COVID is still peeking its head. I mean, it's a big deal here in Clermont County and the state of Ohio and the nation.
Absolutely. We are a nation in turmoil right now, and I would have never thought when this started last March that we would still be in the middle of this pandemic. Would you, board members?
Nor would it be as bad as it is. I never expected it to get this. I mean, when we flattened the curve, it seems like we're higher than the peak we saw back that we flattened the curve from.
Yep. And just to talk about that a minute, I know there's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of uncertainty with this virus. Again, I would just, put that information out there that this is nothing to be afraid of. You have learned the protocols and the proper personal protective equipment that you can employ to ensure your safety and your family's safety. I know Carla and I, there's nothing that we can't do within this county with those things in consideration. It's not fearful. It's just a hazard, like working in a hazardous job like I did for 40 years, that you have to mitigate. And you just have to understand what it is that you want to get done and what personal protective equipment that you need to wear to be able to do that. And then follow the protocols of, we call it hand washing. In the industry I came from, it was called decontamination, to make sure that you could come out of that PPE and then move on. So, again, it's not something to be afraid of. It's something that can be managed, and you have to manage it accordingly. So with that.
One thing into that, though, is you have to determine your risk level. If you feel you're high risk like I am, I think I need to do more than you do or Claire does because I am in a high risk group.
And Ed, I would tell you that you have been right there every time for every one of these meetings, and you and Janice being there at your home and protecting your safety and your health is the right thing to do. That's exactly right. Anything else, members? Well, with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting today.
So moved.
A second.
It's been moved and we have a second. Roll call, Holly.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Aye.
Commissioner Corcoran,
Yes.
Commissioner Painter,
Yes. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful December day. We're getting close to Christmas there. Continue your travels throughout Clermont County. Do what you need to do. Employ the proper PPE and stay safe. Thanks for being here today. I'll see you next week.